You don't have a wolf! He smiled while rejecting her, until the Alpha King claimed her immediately. The wind cut through the northern court like a sharp blade, carrying the scent of pine, frost, and something darker, something that lingered beneath the stone walls of the Silver Wolf Palace. Alara pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, her breath forming little clouds in the freezing air. She had traveled far, across forests thick with shadows, rivers that gleamed like broken glass, and mountains whose peaks were lost in mist. Her heart had carried her through it all, driven by a mixture of duty and hope. She had come seeking the court's counsel, or perhaps something more, an answer to the whispers that haunted her village, that the Silver Wolves, the noble werewolf line, had begun choosing their allies with care, and that their favor could protect or destroy. The palace gates loomed before her, massive doors carved with silver runes that glowed faintly in the winter light. Beyond them she could hear the low murmur of voices, men and women moving like shadows through the marble halls. The rumors had been true. Power clung to this place, thick as the cold air, and no one entered lightly. Alara hesitated, then stepped forward. The doors opened without sound, as if expecting her. Inside, the great hall stretched wider than any building she had ever seen. High above, icy chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, reflecting light and fractured patterns across the polished stone. At the far end, seated upon an elevated throne, was Prince Kalen. His hair was dark as night, his eyes sharp as flint, and his expression colder than the snow that blew outside. He leaned back, one booted foot resting on the edge of the dais, a faint smirk playing at his lips. "Who dares enter the Silver Wolf court unannounced?" he asked, his voice smooth, like velvet over steel. Alara straightened. "I am Alara of the village near Blackwood. I seek an audience with the court." Her voice, though steady, betrayed a flicker of fear. She had heard of Kalen, how he mocked and humiliated those who failed to impress him. She would need courage beyond measure to face him. Kalen's eyes narrowed as he studied her, and then, with a motion that was both graceful and cruel, he beckoned her forward. "Step closer, healer. Let me see what makes you so bold to come before me." She did, though every step felt heavier than the last, as if the hall itself resisted her presence. Around her, courtiers whispered, their eyes darting back and forth between her and Kalen. Alara felt every stare like a weight on her shoulders. Kalen rose, tall and imposing, and circled her slowly, as a predator might a small, wary animal. Healer," he said finally. "And yet, you have no wolf." His lips curled into a smile, mocking, sharp, and cold. No pack, no bond, no power to protect yourself. How amusing that you would come to me seeking judgment when you are so fragile. Elara's chest tightened. His words were like ice, cutting deep, yet a spark of defiance flared inside her. She lifted her chin. "I do not need a wolf to survive," she said. "And I am not here for your judgment, Prince Kalen." Kalen laughed, low and dangerous. "Do you think courage is enough in this court? Do you think wit alone will keep you alive among wolves?" "I have survived worse," she replied, her voice growing stronger. "I will not be afraid of a man who thinks power is only in fangs and claws." A hush fell over the hall. Kalen's smile faded into something sharper, something almost like interest, but still dangerous. He stepped back, shaking his head slowly. "You amuse me, little healer, but amusement does not grant you safety. You will leave this court before sunset, or you will find that survival is far more difficult than you imagine." Alara felt a cold pang of disappointment. She had hoped, perhaps foolishly, that someone here might see her worth beyond what she lacked. She had come prepared to prove herself to earn respect, but Kalen's dismissal made her blood boil. She opened her mouth to argue, but a deep rumbling growl froze her words. It came from the far end of the hall, deeper than any wolf's howl she had ever heard, filled with power, authority, and something almost sorrowful. The courtiers stirred, some lowering their heads in fear. Kalen's smirk faltered. From the shadows of the throne room emerged a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his presence commanding the room without a word. His hair was silver black, his eyes golden and fierce, and he moved with the quiet, terrifying grace of a predator. Even Kalen, confident and arrogant, seemed to shrink in the man's shadow. "Enough," the man said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying a weight that silenced the murmurs instantly. He stepped closer to Alara, his gaze locking on hers. It was as though he could see every fear, every doubt, every hidden truth in her heart. "Are claimed," he said simply. Alara's heart thudded so violently she feared it would betray her. She looked from him to Kalen, confusion and fear warring with awe. Kalen's lips parted, but no words came. The Alpha King, Valor, she later learned, continued forward. His eyes never left hers. His claim was not loud or cruel. It was absolute. The room seemed to shift around her, as if the very air acknowledged the weight of his words. Alara's mind raced. I cannot." "You can," Valor said, his voice calm but firm. "You must. And you will." Kalen's face twisted with fury and disbelief, and for the first time Alara saw a hint of vulnerability behind his arrogance. But before Kalen could speak, Valor turned his attention back to her, and the court fell silent once more. "You are here," Valor continued, "not because of your power, not because of your skill, but because of something greater, something hidden. You may not see it yet, but it is yours." Alara swallowed, unsure whether to feel fear, honor, or confusion. She felt the weight of the room's eyes upon her, the whisper of power that seemed to cling to her skin. She realized slowly that she was no longer merely a visitor. She was bound, by choice or fate she could not tell, to this man whose presence made the very air tremble. Kalen finally found his voice sharp and cutting. "This is madness. You cannot claim her. She is not yours." Valor's gaze did not waver. "I have claimed her," he said simply. "That is all you need to know." A tremor of fear ran through the hall. Some whispered prayers, others dared to glance at the shadows where the walls met the high ceiling. Even Kalen took a cautious step back, his fury and pride clashing with the reality before him. Alara's heart raced, a mix of fear and something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. She had not expected this. Not the rejection, not the claim, not the storm of power that seemed to radiate from Valor. Yet somehow, beneath the fear, there was a strange, compelling pull. She did not understand it, but she knew it was dangerous, and she knew she could not run. Valor inclined his head slightly, a silent command that she should follow him. She hesitated only a moment, then took a step forward, drawn by something she could not name. Every instinct in her body screamed caution, but there was no denying the force that seemed to reach for her, wrapping around her heart with invisible chains. As they moved through the grand hall, the court seemed to shrink away, the murmurs fading into nothingness. For the first time in her life, Alara felt the weight of destiny pressing against her, cold and demanding, yet somehow thrilling. She glanced up at Valor, expecting to see cruelty or malice, and instead found a strange, unreadable expression. Part sorrow, part longing, part something deeper she could not yet name. Outside, the wind howled against the palace walls, but inside, the storm was silent. Alara knew, as she followed the Alpha King into the shadows of the inner chambers, that nothing would ever be the same again. She had come seeking judgment, yet found a claim. She had come seeking safety, yet found power. And in that moment, as the doors closed behind her with a sound like the final note of a distant bell, she understood that her journey had only just begun, and that the world she thought she knew was far more dangerous and far more beautiful than she had ever imagined. And then, from somewhere deep within the palace, a shadow shifted. A growl low and hungry resonated through the stone halls, a promise, a warning, and a question. Alara shivered, knowing that the Alpha King's claim was only the beginning. The corridors of the Alpha King's inner fortress were unlike anything Alara had ever seen. Unlike the grand frozen halls of the Silver Wolf Palace, these passageways were narrower, lined with black stone that seemed to absorb light. Faint runes glowed along the walls, pulsing gently with an otherworldly rhythm. Every step she took echoed, carrying her heartbeat along with it. Valor walked ahead of her, silent and commanding. Each of his steps seemed to carry weight beyond his mortal size. He did not glance back, yet she felt his eyes upon her with every moment. She could not tell if it was caution, curiosity, or some deeper unspoken measure of her worth. "You will remain here for the night," Valor said at last, his voice low, resonant, carrying the weight of absolute command. "Tomorrow we will speak of your place in my court. Tonight you must rest." "You have traveled far." Elora bowed her head slightly, not in submission, but in acknowledgement. She had no choice but to obey, yet her mind was alive with questions. Why had he claimed her? What power did he see in her that Kaelin had ignored? And why did she feel an unexpected pull toward him, a feeling that was both terrifying and thrilling? The room he led her to was modest by palace standards, but far grander than anything she had known in her village. A large window looked out over the cursed forest that surrounded the fortress, its black branches stretching toward the moon like skeletal hands. A small fire burned in the hearth, casting golden shadows on the stone walls. "You will sleep," Valor repeated, his eyes meeting hers for the first time since they entered the chamber, "and you will be safe. No harm will come to you while I am near." Elara nodded, her throat tight. The calm certainty in his voice was almost terrifying. It was not cruelty, nor was it mercy. It was power, and she knew it was absolute. She sat by the fire, rubbing her hands together, trying to chase away the chill that seemed to cling to her bones. The heat of the flames did little to warm the cold dread that wrapped around her heart. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, unbroken, yet heavy with meaning. Finally, she spoke. "Why me?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Why did you claim me?" Valor's gaze did not falter. He took a slow step closer, the shadows from the fire dancing across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the depth in his golden eyes. "Because," he said, "I do not make mistakes. You have something Kaelin cannot see, something that draws me, and perhaps terrifies you as well." Elara's heart fluttered. Terrified? Drawn? She did not understand, yet every instinct in her body acknowledged the truth of his words. Something in him reached deep into her, as though he could touch her soul through her skin. "You speak in riddles," she said, trying to mask her fear with irritation. "And yet I feel, I do not know, pulled toward you." "Why?" Valor smiled faintly, a rare softness that made her stomach twist with emotion she could not name. "Because," he said simply, "you are unlike anyone I have ever known, and unlike anyone I will ever let go." The fire flickered between them, casting shadows that danced on the walls like spirits. Elara's mind raced. She had heard of the Alpha King's curse, a centuries-old bond to the wolf bloodline, a curse that made love dangerous, that made attachment fatal. Yet here he was, standing before her, human and impossibly powerful, offering something she could not name but could feel in every pulse of her being. She took a step back, unsure if she should run or stay. Her survival instinct screamed at her to flee, to escape the power that seemed to wrap around her like a living thing. Yet her feet did not move. Her body, her mind, even her heart seemed bound to him in some invisible way. "You do not trust me," Valor said, his voice soft but commanding, reading her hesitation as if it were written on her skin.
"And you should not. Trust is earned here, and fear is wise."
"But tonight you will remain. You will sleep. And I will watch." Elara swallowed, a mixture of fear and curiosity twisting in her chest. She had come to the Silver Wolf Court seeking answers, seeking protection, perhaps even seeking purpose. Yet she had found something far more dangerous. She had found a man whose presence was a storm and a calm at the same time. A man who could claim her with a word and change the course of her life forever. She moved toward the bed, her steps hesitant. Her fingers brushed the blankets, and she realized her hands were shaking. The firelight caught her hair, highlighting strands of gold in the dark brown, making her look almost like a spirit of the forest herself. Vaylor's gaze lingered on her, and she felt the weight of it in her bones. She wanted to look away, to defy him, but she could not. Not fully. There was something about him that demanded attention, that demanded submission without words or force. "You fear me," he said, "and you should. I am dangerous, but I am not cruel." "Not to those I claim." Ilara paused, her heart racing. "Claim not cruel," she repeated softly, testing the words on her tongue.
Do you always...
"Claim those you meet?" Vaylor's lips twitched into a faint smile. "No. Only those who are destined to walk beside me through fire and shadow. You, healer, are one of the rare few." Alara sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of the dizzying words. She had lived a life of simplicity, of tending to wounds and illness, of quiet days and quiet nights. And now, in this fortress of shadow and magic, she had been claimed by a man whose power could crush her with a thought, whose presence filled the room as though it were alive. The fire crackled, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Vaylor spoke again, his voice dropping even lower, almost a whisper meant only for her. "Do not fear your destiny, Alara.
Embrace it. The path will be difficult.
It may test everything in your heart, but I will not let it break you. Not if you follow me." Alara's breath caught. The pull in her chest, the thrill of danger, the thrill of being seen so completely by someone so powerful, it was intoxicating. She wanted to run, and she wanted to stay. Both at once. She had never felt such conflict in her life. Night deepened outside, the wind moaning through the twisted branches of the cursed forest. The fortress seemed alive with whispers, shadows shifting in corners, the glow of the ruins pulsing softly along the walls. Every step, every glance, every word Vaylor spoke seemed to carry a power she could not resist. And then, as if the world itself paused to mark the moment, Vaylor stepped closer. His presence filled the room completely, shadows wrapping around him yet somehow warm rather than cold. He extended a hand, not demanding, not commanding, but offering. Alara hesitated. Her instinct screamed at her to refuse. Her mind, trained to survive and to trust little, shouted at her to flee. Yet something deeper, something older and unnameable, pulled her forward. She placed her hand in his. The contact was electric, yet not in a way that burned. It was steady, grounding, filling her with a strange certainty. Vaylor's hand was warm, solid, alive, and for the first time Alara felt a strange sense of belonging. Not to a place, not to a title, but to a presence, a power, a bond she could not yet understand. "Good," Vaylor said softly. "You have chosen well. You have taken the first step. But this is only the beginning, Alara. The night is long, and the forest watches. Shadows move in ways you cannot yet see. And not all of them will be friendly." Alara's pulse quickened. The thrill of fear, danger, and anticipation mixed with the strange stirring warmth that came from simply standing near him. She could not deny it, could not escape it. She had been claimed, and there was no going back. As she settled onto the bed trying to calm her racing heart, she looked toward the window. The forest stretched endlessly, dark and silent save for the wind that moaned through the trees. Somewhere in the distance a low growl echoed, a sound that was neither fully wolf nor fully human, a sound that was warning, promise, and question all at once. And Alara knew that her life had changed forever. She had been claimed by the Alpha King Vaylor, a man whose power and presence could consume kingdoms, yet who now held her with a grip that was gentle, commanding, and impossible to resist. She closed her eyes, trying to rest, but sleep did not come easily. Every shadow in the room seemed to move. Every whisper of the wind seemed to speak her name. And in the quiet moments before dawn, she realized that the bond between them was already taking root, silent, inevitable and powerful beyond anything she had ever imagined. Outside, the cursed forest stretched endlessly, waiting. Somewhere in its depths, a shadow stirred, as if testing the edges of the bond that had begun to form. Elara shivered, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that the next step of her journey would be far more dangerous and far more transformative than she could yet imagine. The morning sun rose pale and weak over the cursed forest, struggling to pierce the heavy mist that clung to the ground. Elara stood at the window of her chamber, wrapped in a simple cloak, staring into the sea of blackened trees. She could hear the distant growls of wolves echoing through the valleys, low and menacing, yet strangely melodic. Every sound seemed to vibrate in her chest, a reminder that she was no longer a mere healer from a distant village. She was claimed by the Alpha King. Valor had not yet appeared this morning. The silence of the fortress was almost unbearable, filled with whispers of power and secrets that seemed to hang in the stone walls. Elara traced her fingers along the edge of the window, feeling the chill through the glass, and thought of Kalen. The prince's arrogance had not diminished. She had seen him in the hall yesterday, pacing like a caged wolf, his gaze burning with anger and disbelief at Valor's claim. It was clear he did not understand the Alpha King's presence, nor the bond that had been formed so quietly, so firmly. And yet, she could not shake the feeling that Kalen's ambition would not rest. It would stir trouble, sooner or later. A soft sound drew her attention, a shadow moving at the edge of the window. She turned sharply, and there was Valor, standing silently behind her. His presence filled the room, dark and commanding, yet strangely calm. The golden eyes that had first claimed her now seemed to study her carefully, as if weighing not just her strength, but her heart. "You are awake early," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, but it carried across the stone room like a warm wind. "I could not sleep," Elara admitted. "There is much to think about." Baelor nodded slowly.
Yes, the forest does not sleep, and neither should we.
"Shadows gather, both outside and within the walls of this fortress. You must be ready." Elara turned to face him, curiosity and fear warring in her chest. "Ready for what?" she asked. "For everything," he said simply. "For the path that has chosen you, and for the dangers you cannot yet see." Each word, each glance, carried weight beyond ordinary understanding. Elara could not deny the thrill that pulsed through her. Fear mixed with something she had never felt before. She wanted to run, and yet she wanted to stay, to see what lay beyond this dangerous calm. His presence seemed to bend the light in the room, shadows twisting around him like living silk. "Come," he said. "You must learn. You must understand the forest, the wolves, and the bond we share. It will not be easy, and it will not be safe. But it is necessary." Elara followed, her steps hesitant but determined. They moved through the fortress in silence, passing halls lined with ancient tapestries depicting wolves and kings, battles and alliances long forgotten. Every step seemed to echo with the weight of history, and she felt the pull of destiny stronger with each passing moment. Finally, Valor led her to the edge of the fortress, where the black forest stretched endlessly into the horizon. The trees were twisted, their branches clawing at the sky, and the ground was a tangle of roots and frost. The air was thick with the scent of earth, moss, and something older, something alive. "This forest," Valor began, his voice almost reverent, "is as alive as any wolf, any human, any king. It watches, it listens, and it remembers. You must respect it or it will test you in ways you cannot imagine." Elara swallowed. The forest seemed to pulse with unseen energy, shadows moving as if they had minds of their own. She felt a shiver run down her spine. It feels alive," she whispered. "It is," Valor said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And it knows who you are. It knows what you carry inside you." "What do I carry?" Elara asked, her voice barely audible. "The power to change fate," Valor said, "to break curses, to bind or release shadows, but also the burden of fear, doubt, and anger. You will need to face all of it, or the forest, and those who seek to harm you will take advantage.
Alara felt a strange mixture of pride and terror.
To be powerful, to be important, had always been a dream she barely allowed herself to think. Yet the weight of expectation pressed on her chest, heavier than any she had ever known. "Do you trust me?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Valor looked at her, his golden eyes unwavering. "Trust is not given lightly," he said. "It must be earned. But I do not ask you to trust blindly. I ask you to observe, to learn, and to choose. The path will not be smooth, and there will be pain, but it will also bring strength, and perhaps redemption." Alara nodded slowly. She did not fully understand what he meant, but the word redemption resonated deep in her chest. It was as if the forest itself had whispered it to her, promising something she could not yet grasp. They moved into the forest together, Valor leading the way with an ease that made her own steps seem clumsy. The shadows wrapped around them, yet he walked as though he were part of the darkness itself, commanding it without force. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Alara learned to feel the pulse of the forest beneath her feet, the subtle vibrations in the air, the almost imperceptible movements that revealed the presence of wolves, spirits, and other unseen forces.
She began to understand why Valor had claimed her. He saw potential where others saw weakness.
He saw her courage, her heart, and a spark of power that could either save or destroy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the twisted trees, Valor stopped at the edge of a clearing. The moon had risen, casting silver light across the frost-covered ground. In the center of the clearing stood a circle of stones, ancient and carved with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. "This is the heart of the forest," Valor said, his voice almost a whisper, yet carrying authority that made the forest itself seem to lean in and listen. "It is where power is born, where bonds are forged, and where the past waits to challenge the present." Alara stepped forward, her breath forming small clouds in the icy air. She felt a strange pull toward the circle, as if it were calling to her, whispering promises and warnings. "You must stand here," Valor said, gesturing to the center of the stone circle. "It will test you. Your fears, your doubts, your anger. You must face them, or they will control you." Alara hesitated, then took a deep breath and stepped into the circle. The air seemed to vibrate, the runes glowing brighter as she entered. A chill ran through her body, and she felt an almost overwhelming sense of being watched. The forest was alive in ways she could not yet comprehend. Suddenly visions flashed before her eyes, faces she did not recognize, shadows of memories not her own, whispers of pain and betrayal. She saw kings and queens, wolves and mortals bound by curses, promises, and broken trust. She felt fear, anger, and sorrow all at once, as if the forest were showing her everything she might one day face. Valor stood at the edge of the circle, silent, watching her struggle. "Do not resist," he said. "Do not fight it. Feel it. Understand it. Only then will you have control." Alara gritted her teeth, pushing through the visions, focusing on the strange warmth in her chest, the bond she felt with Valor. She clung to it, using it as a tether to anchor herself amidst the storm of the forest's power. Gradually, the visions began to fade, leaving her trembling but standing. She looked around, her chest heaving, and realized she had survived the first test. The forest seemed to hum, almost approvingly, as if acknowledging her courage. Valor stepped into the circle beside her. He did not touch her, but his presence was grounding, steadying. "You have done well," he said quietly. "This is only the beginning. There will be more challenges, more dangers. And there will be those who seek to test the bond between us. You must be ready." Alara nodded, still catching her breath. She had faced fear, she had faced shadows, and she had not faltered. Yet she knew, deep in her heart, that the journey ahead would be far more difficult. Kaelin's ambition, the whispers in the court, the dangers of the cursed forest, all of it awaited. Am I ready? She whispered, more to herself than to Valor. You will be, Valor said, his golden eyes meeting hers. But readiness is not given. It is earned through courage, trust, and the strength to face the darkness within and without. Remember this. Fear is not weakness. It is a guide. Use it wisely.
As they left the clearing and returned to the fortress, the shadows deepened around them.
Wolves howled in the distance, their cries echoing through the forest like reminders of the power that surrounded them. Elara felt both small and unbreakable, caught between terror and exhilaration, yet bound irrevocably to the Alpha King who had claimed her. And then, as they approached the fortress gates, a figure stepped from the shadows. A figure she had hoped she would never see. Kalen. His eyes burned with fury and determination. You think claiming her will stop me? He spat. You may be the Alpha King, Valor, but she belongs to no one yet. I will not be denied.
Elara's heart pounded. She realized, with sudden clarity, that the trials were only beginning.
The court, the forest, and the hearts of those around her would all test her in ways she could not yet imagine. Valor stepped forward, his presence immense, dark, and commanding. The tension between the three of them crackled like lightning, the forest itself seeming to hold its breath. Elara, Valor said, his voice low, almost a growl. Do not fear. Whatever comes, we will face it together. Trust in the bond we share. It will guide you. Elara swallowed hard, her fingers brushing against the strange warmth she felt within. She could not deny the pull between them, the connection that had begun to take root in the depths of the forest. And yet, she knew that the challenge ahead would test not just her courage, but her heart. Kalen's fury was palpable, his ambition as dangerous as the shadows that crept through the trees. And as the three of them stood there, the night thick around them, Elara understood that the path forward would be one of trials, of growth, and of choices that could alter destiny itself. The wind howled, carrying with it whispers of warning and promise. The cursed forest stretched endlessly, watching, waiting, and testing. And Elara, claimed by the Alpha King, knew that the next step would bring danger, revelation, and a truth she could not yet imagine. The forest at dawn was silent, yet alive. The frost glistened on blackened branches, catching the first pale rays of sunlight like shards of glass. Elara moved carefully along the frozen path, her cloak drawn tight around her. The trials of the past days had changed her. She no longer walked as the timid healer from a distant village. Each step carried strength, courage, and a growing understanding of the bond that connected her to Valor, the Alpha King who had claimed her. Valor walked beside her, his presence steady, protective, yet not oppressive. His golden eyes scanned the forest with unyielding focus, and Elara knew he sensed every movement, every shadow, every potential threat. The lessons in the forest had been harsh, testing her courage, her heart, and the strength of the bond they shared. And now, the greatest trial awaited. Not the forest, not her own fears, but the ambition and fury of Kalen. They reached a clearing at the heart of the forest, the circle of ancient stones standing silent and imposing. The runes along the stones glowed faintly in the early light, the magic of the place pulsing with history. It was here that Valor had taught her to face shadows, to feel the rhythm of the forest, and to connect to the hidden power within herself. Today it would be tested in ways she could not yet predict. Kalen stood waiting, arrogance and fury radiating from him like a living force. His eyes burned with ambition and resentment. So this is where the Alpha King hides, he spat, his voice sharp in the cold air. Claiming her will not stop me. She does not belong to you. Valor stepped forward, calm and immense, the shadows of the forest bending around him. You are mistaken, Kalen, he said. Elara is no one's to claim by fear or by ambition. She has been tested, and she stands with me by choice, not by force. Step forward if you dare, but know this. The forest protects those who are claimed and true of heart. Elara's pulse quickened. The bond between them had grown, a quiet, unstoppable current of trust and understanding. She felt Valor's strength through it, his patience, and his unwavering care. And in turn she felt her own power rising, a sense of courage that no fear could erase. She would not stand aside. Kalen lunged, but before he could reach them, Valor shifted. His form blurred for an instant, shadows twisting around him, and then he was there. A towering presence, his wolf form visible in glimpses through the magic of the forest. His golden eyes glowed like fire. The ground seemed to tremble beneath him. "Do not underestimate her!" Baylor growled, his voice low and powerful, resonating with the heartbeat of the forest itself. "She is stronger than you believe." Elora stepped forward, placing a hand on the ancient stone circle. A warmth spread through her fingers, traveling up her arms and into her chest. She felt the pulse of the forest, the connection to Valor, and the power within herself. She raised her gaze to Kalen. "I am not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady, strong. "And I choose who stands with me." Kalen faltered, his confidence shaken by the quiet power in her words. The forest seemed to pulse around her, the ancient runes glowing brighter, responding to her courage. For the first time, Kalen realized that Alara was not simply a pawn to be claimed. She was a force, a spirit intertwined with the Alpha King in ways he could not break. Baylor shifted back to his human form, towering and regal. "You see now, Kalen," he said, his voice calm but sharp. "True strength is not taken by force, nor given to those who demand it. It is earned, and her heart is already committed to the path we walk together." Kalen's expression darkened, but he did not move closer. He turned abruptly, retreating into the shadows of the forest. Elara felt relief, but also the weight of knowing that challenges would come again. Ambition and envy were persistent forces, and they never truly disappeared. Vela reached out, taking her hand. His touch was grounding, steady, and warm. "You have done well," he said quietly. "This is only the beginning of your journey, but you have faced your first true test. And you have passed it not because of my power, but because of your own." Elara looked at him, her chest still heaving. The bond between them had strengthened, quiet and undeniable. I felt it," she said softly. "The forest, the power, the bond. It all felt alive." "It is," Valor said. "And it will guide you, but never forget, the greatest power is in choosing love and trust over fear. That is what will save you, and it is what will redeem me." Elara understood then that Balar's curse had not been a chain, but a burden of solitude. He had lived for centuries without hope, without connection, believing that love would destroy him. But she had come into his life not with force or fear, but with courage, compassion, and an unyielding heart. In her he had found the possibility of redemption, the chance to be human again, even in a body bound to wolf and shadow. As they walked back to the fortress together, the frost melting under the faint morning light, Elara felt a quiet strength settle in her chest. She was no longer the healer from a distant village. She was a force of change, a presence that could bind shadow, face danger, and challenge the hearts of kings. Valor spoke quietly beside her. "Do you understand now? The bond between us is not chains. It is trust, choice, and courage. You have the strength to face anything, because you do not walk alone."
Alara's heart swelled.
The fear, the uncertainty, the shadows that had haunted her journey. She could face them all, because she had Vylor, and because she had discovered the power within herself. The court of the Silver Wolves would soon see the change. Kalen's ambitions, once threatening, now seemed small in comparison to the bond they shared, and Elara knew that no test, no shadow, no threat could break what had begun in the heart of the forest. They returned to the fortress, the walls alive with morning light. Wolves watched from the shadows, their eyes glinting with recognition, respect, and awe. The fortress itself seemed to acknowledge the bond, its stone corridors echoing with a quiet, approving hum. Valor led her to a quiet chamber overlooking the courtyard. "Rest now," he said, but not as one who was afraid. Rest as one who is ready, who has faced the shadows and walked through them. Elara sat by the window, watching the courtyard come alive with activity. Guards patrolled, courtiers moved silently, and the silver wolves themselves were visible beyond the walls, shadows moving with quiet precision. The kingdom was vast, dangerous, and alive, and she had found her place within it. Baylor joined her, standing silently, his hand brushing hers. "Tomorrow, the world will test us again," he said, "but tonight, we are together, and that is enough. For now." Elara looked up at him, the bond between them stronger than ever. She felt the warmth of his hand, the strength of his presence, and the certainty that she had never truly been alone. "Together?" she said softly, meeting his gaze. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady, golden eyes softening. "Together we can face anything." Outside, the forest stretched endlessly, its shadows no longer threatening, but protective. The ancient stones glowed faintly, a reminder of the trials faced and the strength earned. And in the distance the wolves howled, not in anger, but in acknowledgement of what had been achieved. Elara leaned back, letting the calm wash over her. She had been claimed by the Alpha King, faced the shadows, and emerged stronger. She had found courage she did not know she possessed, and in Valor, she had found the possibility of love, trust, and redemption. The morning wind carried a promise through the trees, whispering of futures yet to come, challenges yet to face, and the quiet certainty that some bonds, once forged, could not be broken. And Elara, claimed, transformed, and brave, knew that whatever came next, she would meet it not with fear, but with courage, heart, and the unshakable strength of the bond she shared with the Alpha King. The kingdom awaited, the forest watched, and the world shifted ever so slightly beneath the weight of their courage and their hearts. And as the sun rose fully, casting its golden light across frost, stone, and shadow, Elara understood. She had found not just survival, but purpose, power, and the quiet, unstoppable force of love and redemption.